guys, Travis with Everglades. Welcome back to the channel. And today we're going to talk about rotary cutters, mulching heads, all that fun stuff. What's the difference? High flow, standard flow, how much money should I spend? We're going to talk about all that and more. Stick around. Man, I tell you what, I get a lot of calls every week of guys saying, hey man, how much is I'm looking for a skid steer and a grinder head, a mulching head or whatever. And a lot of times, a lot of guys are envisioning something like this Fecon Blackhawk here when they ask that question. But in reality, depending on your budget, like with a lot of things, it's how much money do you want to spend and what kind of work are we doing and how much do you want to spend maintaining your equipment to determine which one's right for you, right? So you may not necessarily need something like this Fecon Blackhawk here. Matter of fact, for your budget, this RC72B rotary cutter may work really well for you. And check this out, we got it hooked up to this John Deere 317 skid steer behind me. So that's right, you can run these things with a smaller skid steer. You don't need a Mac Daddy big Cadillac, skid steer in order to run it. You can use a smaller skid steer to very effectively run a rotary cutter. So what's a rotary cutter? Well, it's really similar to like a bush hog, like on a tractor. And this thing, this RC72, it's a 72-inch cutting width. It'll process 4-inch material. That's right, so you can do grass, saplings, a lot of stuff like that very easily. And the nice thing is the price point on these things. You'll find they have a very attractive price point. They also are relatively inexpensive to run. Now, why is that? Well, blades for these things are a lot cheaper and they're a lot more resilient. So what do I mean by that? I want you to envision you're running this thing, say a mulching head or something, whatever, out there in the woods, and all of a sudden, ka-clang, you hit something and the thing stops. Well, guess what? You just found a fence post, an old car, no telling. There's all kind of stuff out in the woods. So with a rotary cutter, the blades are a lot more resistant against impacts. A mulching head, you may have just broken a tooth. You might need to replace that tooth. And that's a lot more expensive than replacing a blade. See what I'm saying? Also, you can kind of sharpen these a little bit, put another edge on them. The blades will last a long time on these things. So if you're thinking, well, I've already got a big skid steer, and I need to process a little bit bigger than 4-inch material, what's my other option? Well, we got this RX84. Now the X is extreme, right? So the RX rotary cutter, now this is an RX84, right? So we got 84 inches of cutting goodness right here, right? And you also notice, let's kind of compare real quick. Look at how the front of this one is it's more flat, and here we're more angular. So why is that? Well, your RX84, this thing is rated for up to 10-inch material. That's right. So you've got 4-inch material on the RC72, 10-inch material on the RX84. So that opens up, think about it, you can go through a lot thicker underbrush, you can chew up a little bit bigger saplings, and I tell guys it's a lot like eating a pizza. You don't just shove the whole pizza in your mouth. Just take 1 or 2 bites at a time. Just let her eat, as they say on the internet. Just let her eat. So this RX84 is a high flow rotary cutter, right? What does that mean? That means you need a skid steer with high flow hydraulics that put out at least in the 30s for gallons per minute, like at least 30 gallons a minute and up in order to effectively run it. Can you run it with lower gallons per minute? You can, but it's going to perform best when you're putting over 30 gallons a minute through it. Now, a lot of things are true on this RX84 as the RC. It's still relatively inexpensive to run. The price point, it's a little more than this, but I can tell you it's a lot less than a mulching head. So if you're kind of dipping your toe into the mulching head world, you don't necessarily want to fork over, darn near 50 grand for one of these things, but you're like, well, you know what, we got a couple jobs here and there, we might be able to sustain it, let's see where it goes. The nice thing is, you've always got a place in your fleet for something like this. So, for example, if you're doing mostly grass, overgrown brush, things like that, These things are great. You don't necessarily need to bring out your mulching head that costs a lot more per hour to run. So what do I mean by that? Well, whenever I get in the mulching head, I'll show you. But basically, to sum it up, the rotary cutters are great price point options, and especially with this RC72, I sell a lot of these things. So let's kind of get into the mulching heads a little bit, right? This is the Fecon 6015 mulching head, right? So what kind of machines are this for? Well, I'll tell you. You could stick this thing on that 317 and you can just ride out. I mean, you can rock and roll, you can get it done. And the nice thing about these is they have an attractive price point. So that's right. If you've got a standard flow skid steer and you're like, man, I really don't want to pay an arm and a leg for a bigger high flow skid steer, well, guess what? You can make this work with your smaller skid steer. That's right, like your 75 horsepower and below skid steers that aren't necessarily, flow masters, flow monsters, whatever you want to call them, high flow beasts. You can run it with this thing, right? So right now you're probably scratching your chin at the house and you're saying, well, Travis, how can a smaller machine run something like this? And I'll tell you this. You see how there's these rings on here? What these rings do is these are what you call bite limiters. So what it does is it controls how much of a bite that your teeth can take out at a time so you don't just bog down the mulching head, right? So it allows it to effectively run and not bog itself down. So you can still get really good results on underbrush, your smaller trees, things like that. And here's the other nice thing about a mulching head. It leaves really nice sawdusty type material. A rotary cutter is going to leave bigger pieces. It's just what it is. It's more, think about it. A rotary cutter is just chopping it down and leaving it there. Now this guy here, okay, now it's almost like it's going to leave more sawdust, and that may or may not make a difference to your customer. So that's a question you've got to ask. Is it worth spending the extra money to get that finer finished product and ultimately get into some thicker underbrush? So again, these are great mulching heads for your 75 horsepower and below machines. They do really good on these. All right, so if you're watching this at the house right now and you're pounding your fist on the coffee table and you're saying, well, Travis, I need power, I need performance, I need to clear this brush, I need to get this money, well, I would say you need this Fecon Blackhawk, right? So the Fecon Blackhawk is a very high performance mulching head, right? So if you look at this thing, you've got 72 inches of cutting width, and make no mistake about it, you're gonna need a skid steer that puts out a lot of hydraulic flow, right? You're gonna need at least in the high 30s, like 37 and up gallons per minute to run this thing effectively. So again, we see similar features on this mulching head that we saw on the smaller Fecon. So take a look at these, again, these rings right here. That's what you call the bite limiter, also known as a depth control rotor, or DCR. So the guys that are serious about mulching, they will agree with me on this and say, hey, if you're, especially in Florida, where we have a lot of fibrous type material, you really want that depth control rotor, because think about it, like a palmetto tree, and some of y'all from up north may not know what a palmetto tree is, but it's like a palm tree type situation, really fibrous. So whenever you bite into it, it can create a mess. The nice thing about the depth control rotor is it really helps you process those fibrous trees like that, chew them up, and not get bogged down and keep rocking and rolling. So it performs really well in Florida. And the other side of it too, you may be wondering, well, I've got a mulching head at the house and mine don't look like that. And I would tell you, you probably just have what they call a smooth drum. A smooth drum doesn't have the rings on it, and often you'll see those with carbide teeth on them, which that's fine, and the carbides work really well in a carbide's almost like a hammer, right? So it works really well in rocky type soil, like if you're up there like in Georgia, you up there in Georgia, you up there doing your thing, chewing it up, it'll work pretty good up there. But if you're working through fibrous stuff, it doesn't tend to work as well as the knives do. So keep that in mind. But basically, this Fecon Blackhawk is going to be, it's a very high performance mulching head, and the price tag certainly reflects that. It's a great mulching head, but I'll tell you what, here at Everglades, we are serious about supporting these things. You'll tune it to your machine. We stock the wear parts. You call us up, like, hey man, I need a couple more teeth. Hey man, I need a liner. I need wear shoes, whatever. We've got that here. I mean, like I said, this is serious to us. We sell a lot of these things. So give us a shot whenever you're taking a look for one of these next thing. Hey guys, so thanks for watching. And by the way, did you know that all these attachments behind me will fit any make and model of skid steer out there? That's right. If you don't have a John Deere skid steer, hit us up, man. You can slap that V-Con on there, you can slap this rotary cutter on there, and you can go to work. And we'd be happy to help you out on it. Hey, be sure to like, share, subscribe, put it in your social media feed, talk to your friends about it. We'd really appreciate it. We'll see you on the next one.